Hello and welcome to Hardcover Feedback. I'm Kelly Campos.
And I'm Brandy Smith.
On today's show, we will be talking about a teen novel, a sci-fi thriller, and a World War II era comic book inspired historical fiction. The first up is the teen novel, which is Absolute Brightness by James Lecesne.
Phoebe didn't want him, but then again, no one wanted him. Phoebe's life is transformed when her flamboyant cousin Leonard shows up on her doorstep. He has a strange outlook on life and doesn't really fit in anywhere. But when he starts working out at his aunt's salon, all the older ladies there just cling to every word he has to say and listen to every piece of advice that he can give them. Well, one day, Leonard mysteriously disappears, and no one knows where he is or what happened. And suddenly, Phoebe's attitude changes when she realizes just what she'll be missing now that Leonard's gone.
Leonard was wearing capri pants, pink and lime green plaid, and a too small t-shirt which exposed his midriff. He wore a pair of shoes that were more like sandals set atop a pair of 2-inch wooden platforms. Both ears were pierced, though only one chip of pale blue glinted from his left lobe. He carried what looked like a flight attendant's overnight flight bag from the 1960s. The strap was hitched over his shoulder, lady style. "Ciao," he said to me as he smiled and held out his hand. I took hold of his delicate fingers and gave them a quick shake while internally rolling my eyes. He was way too different. Don't get me wrong, I like different. I am different. But when different goes too far, it stops being a statement and just becomes weird. I made up my mind right then and there that he and I would not be getting that close. And as a way of making my point, I turned on my heel and got out of there as fast as I could without knocking anything over. Absolute Brightness. Leonard, the main character which we just described, shows up on Phoebe's doorstep pretty much unannounced, and she has to take in this cousin that she doesn't really want to. And havoc ensues because he completely transforms all the old ladies there with his brand of queer eye, basically. And it's a little bit, to me, it's a little bit formulaic in that way. Like, well, yeah, you know he's gay, you know he's gonna come in and be super fabulous, and you know he's gonna come in and make everybody feel great about themselves, and you know that A is gonna follow B, gonna follow C, gonna follow D, until he disappears. That's when it got a little bit interesting for me, because Phoebe then finds out all these things and she has to figure out, well, where did he go? And it's not necessarily a mystery, although she does, you know, figure things out.
Right.
But she has to discover some things about herself and about people around to really find out what happened to Leonard and where he went to, which does not necessarily end up to be a great thing that happened. But I liked it a little more than I thought I would.
I didn't really like it at all, but I totally see what you were saying with the formula. Like, it was too formulated. It was like you knew that this guy was going to come to this house where Phoebe and Deidre, the sisters, are staying, you know, with their mom, and they all fight all the time, and Phoebe doesn't like it there, and you knew that he's going to come and shake everything up. And I like Leonard, but you know, Leonard had secrets too, which was kind of interesting. He was a lot deeper than you think.
Exactly.
With the initial description that you just read, there's a lot more there.
Exactly, and it's why he chooses to be the way he is. You know,
Right.
I think those are the interesting points that this book makes. I think there are some very good characterizations, such as the guy who I won't say his name, who comes into Phoebe's life,
Right.
and she sees him one way at first, and then with Leonard's help, she sees him another way. But which way is true? Which way is real? The face you show now, the face you show later, the face you make for yourself, or is there something underneath that all that's really you? And I think that's what is the interesting thing about this book. I think that maybe 5th, 6th, 7th graders might really enjoy it, might really get something out of it, but it's not as deep as I had hoped it might be, as I thought it might be.
It seems like it's going to be. The topic,
Yeah.
you know, the subject matter seems like it's going to be really intense, but it's really kind of watered down, and not in a bad way, like you said. I mean, it would be good for the younger teens, but I don't know.
Right. It's specifically for a teenager who is more mature than their reading style, because the subject matter can be a little bit intense, although the writing is not that intense.
Right.
So
that's it.
If you have a reader who wants to read more intricate ideas and subjects, then this is definitely something for them. Because it helps them out get some meat without being too hard for them.
The high-low thing.
Exactly.
High interest, low reading level.
Exactly. Exactly. Right. So Absolute Brightness by James Lecesne gets 2.5 stars from me.
I'm going to give it 2.
I thought we might be on about the same page.
Yeah, it wasn't bad, but...
Yeah, it is what it is. Good for what it's good for, but not up my book. So that's that book, and we will be right back with another.
All right, we're back. On our next book that we're talking about on Hardcover Feedback today is Snow Crash by Neal Stephenson, the sci-fi thriller.
Ooh. Now, in reality, hero protagonist delivers pizza for the mob-affiliated Cosa Nostra Incorporated. But in the virtual world of the metaverse, hero is literal royalty. He's one of the original hackers that created some of the coolest places in the metaverse, which is like a sort of hyper internet. But now, along with YT, a young courier with some profitable connections, Hero must destroy a new computer virus that's literally killing hackers everywhere. Together, they travel through the neon-lit streets on a search and destroy mission that's looking for the shadowy virtual villain that's threatening to bring about information apocalypse.
All right. The deliberator sticks his black-clad arm out of the shattered window. A white rectangle glows in the dim backyard light. A business card. The courier snatches it from him on her next orbit and reads it. It says, "Hero protagonist, last of the freelance hackers, greatest sword fighter in the world, Stringer, Central Intelligence Corporation, specializing in software-related intel, movies, music, and microcode." On the back is gibberish explaining how he may be reached. A telephone number, a universal voice phone locator, a P.O. box, his address on 6 electronic communications nets, and an address in the metaverse. "Stupid name," she says, shoving the card into one of the 100 little pockets in her coverall. "But you'll never forget it," Hero says. "If you're a hacker, how come I'm delivering pizzas?" "Right, because I'm a freelance hacker. Look, whatever your name is, I owe you one." All right. Snow Crash is insane. It basically makes a world of video games the only world that really matters.
True.
You kind of plug in and you have business meetings there, and if you're not cool in there, it doesn't matter if you're cool outside, because let's face it, the outside world really doesn't have anything to it.
Right.
Because
the outside world has kind of crumbled, sort of. I mean, it's completely taken over by corporations, and the places that people live are different countries, even if it's just a sublet. What do you call those?
Wasn't there like an area that was like Bob's Hong Kong or something
Bob's
like
Hong
that?
Kong is
it's
a subdivision.
Ridiculous. Yeah, a subdivision
essentially, but it's a whole different country,
and you
have to have a passport.
You could like run across the street and be in another country.
It's like the U.S. has completely collapsed, and all these different companies / countries have stepped in, and the mob owned Uncle Enzo's Cosa Nostra Pizza. That's one example. The mob owns different subdivisions that you can live in, and you have your passport that says you live there, and if you live there, you have affiliation with certain things, and it's similar in some ways to Jennifer Government, which we were talking about, but very, very different.
It's more of a humorous extent.
Exactly.
Like, this book is talking about like a dark dystopian society of the future, but in such a comedic light that it's like, when we talked about Jennifer Government, like I think it was our first show, we talked about that one where that was like, wow, this could really happen.
That was very serious.
This is like, this could happen, but wouldn't that be ridiculous if it did?
It would be absolutely ridiculous.
The guard dogs were like, robots who attack things.
It's all a hyper sense of what things could be.
Exactly.
From the internet, which is the basics of this whole book. The internet is not just the internet, it's hyper internet. It's like the video games where you look at it and there's an actual drawing of a person that's your avatar, and that avatar does what you want. Well, in this, you have a suit on that makes you actually feel like you're there, and you can have sword fights, and you can kill people, and you can do all these things or whatever, and it's as if you're actually there. It's 3D. It's the metaverse. It's not the internet. It's the metaverse, a whole universe. And you can be one person there and be a completely another person in your real life. And
Or you could be like Hero and be both.
And be
You'd
both.
be the same.
Exactly, exactly. Now, so what happens in this book is that in this whole world, there are very bad people who I'm trying to, talk around the
Not
plot.
say who they are.
Exactly. Who want to do very bad things. They're trying to kill you with this virus that's called snow crash. And there's actually some very interesting mythology wrapped up in this that could be, you never know, but
it was really intense when you got to the nitty gritty of what it
exactly,
actually was.
exactly.
standing
And
for.
it's very interesting things that you could read in other books, go and find out what the actual history of these
Right.
mythological statements is. But they have lots of that mixed up in this technology and everything, but it's definitely sci-fi. It's not fantasy. It's not, religious. It's sci-fi.
Absolutely.
It's a straight up sci-fi book.
Absolutely.
I wouldn't say it's hard sci-fi.
Oh, no.
But it is a science fiction novel.
It has lingo, but it's not hard to understand lingo.
Right.
So
It's not one of those hardcore science fiction books where you have to have a science computer dictionary next to you to
Right.
understand what they're trying to say is going on.
But-
The characters I thought were very good in this book.
yeah.
But honestly, I had to fight my way through the first chapter and a half.
See, I like that. I thought it was awesome.
The first chapter and a half, I was sitting there going, oh, cheese and rice, what is this? I can't read it. And then after the first chapter and a half, I'm like, oh, okay. Oh, okay. And then I really got into it and I flew through the rest of it. But I really had to fight through that first chapter and a half. I don't really know why. Maybe I wasn't in the right frame of mind.
Yeah, I
Don't
didn't
know.
have a problem with it because I remember you telling me that, and I was like, I don't know.
didn't
But I
know.
totally recommend this for anyone who enjoys computers and knowing
Yeah.
how they work and the inner work, what the binary code is, because the binary code is very important. So
Right.
you
don't have to understand how it works.
No,
You just have to know what it is.
It helps
Right.
a little, and you're
Yeah.
like, oh.
Exactly.
But all right, I have to say, I give Snow Crash 3.5 stars.
I did too.
Awesome, we agree.
Doesn't happen often.
No,
3.5
really.
stars from both of us for Snow Crash by Neal Stephenson. And we'll be back for another book. Welcome back. Our next book is The Amazing Adventures of Kavalier and Clay by Michael Chabon.
Joseph Kavalier lived in Jewish Prague during World War II. He escaped his home through an amazing journey to live in America with his cousin Sam Clayman and his mother. Sam and Joseph decide they're going to get together and create an amazing superhero, just like Superman, in order to get their American millions. As The Escapist turns into a massive media event, and Sam and Joseph spend the rest of their lives contemplating their decisions and how they got this far.
Everybody's trying to get in on this costume character thing. We've got to jump on it before the bubble goes pop. I already have 7 guys lined up, boss, said Sammy, including Frank Pantaleone, who just sold a strip to King Features. This was nearly true. And Joe here, you see what kind of work he can do. How about that cover? Punching Adolf Hitler, Anna Paul said, inclining his head doubtfully. I just don't know about that. Hello, Jack? Yeah, that's right. Okay. He hung up. I don't see Superman getting mixed up in politics. Not that I wouldn't personally mind seeing somebody clean Hitler's clock. That's the point, boss, said Sammy. Lots of people wouldn't mind. When they see this, Anna Paul waved the controversy away. I don't know. Sit down, stop talking. Why can't you be a nice, quiet kid like your cousin here? Kavalier and Clay. It's so deceptive.
It is. It looks like it's fun and
just about comic
humorous
books
and
everything, and it is about all of that.
It is.
But it has so many different layers. It's about the Nazis in World War II and how helpless people felt, especially before the U.S. decided to enter the war.
Right.
People who were here that were angry that we weren't in the war, angry that we weren't helping people out, that we weren't doing what they thought we should do, and how helpless people felt, especially Jews here who knew that their family was being killed or didn't know that their family was being killed and just couldn't get in touch with them and didn't know what was going on. It really captures that helplessness and the desire to do something, anything that they think will help, which is how they invent the escapist.
All Joseph wants to do is get enough money to get his little brother over.
Right.
Because his brother is still stuck in Prague, and you know, the way Joseph got out, there's no way anyone else could have done it that way.
And you know, that really says a lot about how everything got started here. Without going in too much detail, it involves a mythical golem, which is somehow real. It involves a very large coffin and pretend dead guy. It involves escapes and lockpicking and Houdini-esque disappearing acts, traveling through Japan to get to New York, you know, from Prague, which doesn't make any sense. You know,
but
so
it works.
it's a very huge undertaking, which draws on all of the skills that Joseph Kavalier had, which up to the point of the Nazis entering, then he was kind of a, you know, come as it will kind of guy. You know, he studied this and he studied that because his parents had money and he didn't know what he wanted to do. So he did this and that and that and this for a little bit, and all those things come into play into making who he is. You know, the art that he learned, the escapism that he learned, you know, the languages that he learned, it all comes into play into making this comic book his life's work, you know.
Well, that's one thing that's really deceptive, is you think, okay, when you get started, it's going to be the story of the two of them and their career as, you know, comic book men.
artists, right. Which, by the way, I have to insert, while they're discussing all these new comic book ideas,
that was awesome.
I'm like, ooh, I want to read that one.
That one
ooh,
sounds
I want to
good.
read that one. Ooh, that one's really good. But none of them exist, and it made me mad.
Some of the ones, like later you'll meet, you know, the femme fatale of the boys' lives, and she comes up with some good ones too that would have been interesting. But regardless, it's like you get to a point where you're reading and you're like, wow, this is really good. This is really good.
And then
then you're like,
here, it changes.
And it's like, well, what's going to happen now?
Right.
I have 300 pages left to read.
But it never loses
stops.
interest.
It's
it never
great.
loses interest. It always keeps going, and everything makes sense. There's not any of these left turns where you're like, whoa, how did that happen? You know, everything makes complete sense in the way these people's lives progress and the things that happen. And some of the things are so super soap opera. You're like, ooh, but not in a soap opera way.
No, it's like it's a turn that you didn't expect, but not it's not so unbelievable.
Exactly.
You could totally see why it happened the way it happened.
Exactly.
And, you know, who's who and what's what and why are they.
Now, to get into a little more the designs of the comic books and things like that, which is again the beginning, because I don't want to get too far into it. We never like to give away the plots, but the designs of things and the way they come up with this was stuff I just definitely never knew.
Yeah.
So anybody who's interested in the history of comic books, because of course, although Kavalier and Clay are made up characters, the essentials of what happened in this time period, which is the golden age of comic books, is definitely true. You know, it makes sense. You know, there's a lot of history wrapped up in that. And it's so interesting to see how they started at this midget radio comics, you know, which midget radio comics doesn't even make it sounds like pulp, you know, and how they go from that to something that really has meaning, and the progression of comic books from being really poor artists who, you know, were just dime store artists trying to make a buck, to people who actually studied and things, and how they used film to inspire the way they drew the panels and things. You know, if you have any knowledge of comic books at all, and how now they're very, very graphic novels, to how they started at just these boop, 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 Sunday morning comic strip looking things. You know, this really describes how the transformation took place, and that was really interesting to me, you know, somebody who's just a casual comic book reader.
Right, and it should also be known, you know, they make references to real people in here. That's not all make-believe.
Exactly.
You know, I think they mention, I know they mentioned Superman for real, for one, and Marvel Comics, I think they bring up a couple times.
I think they mentioned Stan Lee.
Stan Lee. So, I mean, that's the other thing, is it's kind of, it's not, The characters are make-believe, but the situations and the time frame are so real and true to life that it's interesting. It's an interesting glimpse into that world.
Exactly. And the main thing that carries it through is, again, the characters, because you can't have a good book without good characters.
Exactly.
And the characters are true to life. They're true to what their experiences are, and they are true to the story of what's happening to them. When there's this Arctic tundra fist fight, which I won't say how we got there. When there's this Arctic tundra fist fight, you're flabbergasted. You're like, oh no, but you don't want it. Oh no, what's going to happen? You don't know. And that's the real life, by the way, not the comic book.
Yeah,
the Arctic tundra fist fight.
That's the other thing. It's like the comic books are almost nothing compared to what they're
real
actually
life.
living.
Exactly.
But all in all, I really like this book.
I did as well.
I have to, give it, I think 3 stars I'm going to give in this one.
And I'm going back to my 3.5 stars. I think that there are a lot of very good qualities about this book. Even with a 9-month-old baby, when I can't get enough sleep at night, then I was up going, okay, just 5 more minutes, and that doesn't happen often nowadays. So I really enjoyed the book, and I would give it 3.5. So
right.
I think it's time for a recap.
All right.
Jinx.
Okay. Scary.
First book up was Absolute Brightness, and I gave it 2.5 stars, and Brandy gave it 2 stars. That was our low point of the day.
Yeah.
For Snow Crash, our sci-fi intrigue drama, we both gave it 3.5 stars. And for The Amazing Adventures of Kavalier and Clay, I gave it 3.5 stars, and Brandy gave it 3.
Not bad.
Not bad.
We did pretty good this time.
I think so.
All right.
Thank you so much for joining us, and come join us next time on Hardcover Feedback. Until then, keep reading. Bye.